Discover the amazing journey of 10,000 years of human civilization, inspiring truths revealed. Sarah stared at the hastily scrawled words on the whiteboard, the stark reality of the school board's decision looming over her like a dark cloud. History, her passionate subject, was on the chopping block. She gripped the smooth edge of the desk, inhaling deeply as she fought against the swirling anxiety in her chest. At 32, she felt the urgency of every minute ticking away. How could she convince them? How could she defend a subject that held the stories of resilience, struggle, and hope? The community of Maplewood was shrinking, resources were scarce, and her heart raced with the fear of what life would be like without the echo of past generations guiding the future. They considered history an optional luxury, a mere distraction in a world driven by economic survival. Every meeting, she had to confront that truth, admitting to herself that history might be seen as expendable stung deeply. Her grandfather's journals remained hidden in the attic, echoing the tenacity that had shaped their family through countless adversities, but even that connection felt fragile against the weight of budget cut discussions. In the weeks that followed, she rummaged through memories, each journal a glimpse into her grandfather's hardships as an immigrant. The words seemed to pull her into a vortex of nostalgia and dread. She felt isolated. The very narratives that should have united the town were now seen as too sentimental, too antiquated. "We need to focus on the future, not live in the past," a councilman's voice echoed in her mind, and she shuddered. The tension built with each passing day, and she realized she might be fighting not just for her subject, but for the soul of the community. Her mind raced with dread at the thought of failing them. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, and she pored over her grandfather's words with an urgent intensity, knowing they held the key to unlocking her students' imaginations. The project she envisioned, a tapestry of local histories, began to swirl in her mind like a tempest. Yet, just when her determination solidified, the councilman confronted her publicly with disdain, questioning the value of her mission. Each word from his mouth scraped against the raw edges of her resolve, feeding an internal anguish that spread like poison through her thoughts. As the looming school board meeting approached, Sarah wrestled with despair and determination. The weight of belief pressed heavily on her, and the fear of being truly carried away. The thought that she'd let her grandfather down, that her voice would be lost to apathy, gnawed at her relentlessly. In a moment of utter turmoil, she vowed to reveal how history wasn't just a collection of stories. It encapsulated the very ideals of hope and democracy that this town needed to remember. But the night before the meeting, she was awakened by a knock on the door. A student from her class stood there, trembling. The innocent face of a child now held a powerful story, waiting to be heard. As they exchanged glances, the urgency thickened. Would Sarah have the strength to stand against the tide, to break the silence, to guard the stories that mattered most? The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as they exchanged their words. There was no turning back now. Sarah sat down with the student, her heart racing as the weight of the impending school board meeting settled over her. The young boy, Marcus, fidgeted nervously, his eyes darting about as if searching for an anchor in the swirling storm that hung heavy in both their minds. "Mrs. Patterson," he began, his voice faltering but filled with determination, I wanted to tell you about my grandfather. He came here from Mexico, just like your grandpa in those stories." The mention of her grandfather drew her in, reminding her of the journals that had become her guiding light. "What's your grandfather's story, Marcus?" she asked, feeling a swell of urgency to connect their narratives. "He came here with nothing. He worked hard, and he always told me that it's important to know where you come from. We have to remember the struggles so we don't repeat them." His voice grew stronger, revealing a maturity beyond his years. Sarah felt a flicker of hope igniting within her chest. Maybe this was the way in. And how does that make you feel about our history lessons? She prompted, knowing this was crucial. It feels important, he said, his confidence rising. It helps me understand why we are who we are today. Without it, it's like we're lost. In that moment, an idea unfurled in Sarah's mind. What if she could craft a presentation that intertwined the students' personal histories with the broader narrative of humanity? If history was a fabric, each thread was vital to the whole. She needed to find a way to present this at the board meeting, a way to make them see that cutting her subject meant severing a vital connection to identity and community. As Marcus recounted tales of resilience passed down through his family, Sarah began to plot and plan. The gear of her mind began churning in earnest. She envisioned an interactive session where students could bring their family histories, compiling them alongside historical events they studied. The passion blooming within her felt palpable, transforming anxiety into exhilaration. "Marcus, do you think others would want to share their stories?" she asked, her excitement bubbling over. "Yeah. A lot of us have cool histories." He grinned, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. Sarah nodded, her resolve solidifying. This presentation could become more than just a defense for her class, it could serve as a spotlight on the diverse stories that formed the foundation of Maplewood itself. She felt empowered, rekindled by the innocence and wisdom of her students. As she prepared for the meeting, she couldn't help but confront the psychological ramifications of this undertaking. If she succeeded, she'd not only save history but potentially redefine its importance in the eyes of the council. But failure lurked like a shadow, reminding her how easily they could dismiss her passion and her students' voices. What if the council was right? What if history really was unnecessary in a world focused solely on progress? The doubts crept in, but she clenched her fists and steeled herself. The night of the board meeting arrived, an electric pulse of tension threading through the air. Sarah stood in front of the gathered council members, her heart pounding with courage as Marcus and a few other students flanked her, eyes bright with hope. In that moment, she realized the school board's decision held more significance than just a program cut. It would echo throughout the community. She took a deep breath, steadied her voice, and prepared to speak, feeling an unshakable bond form between her and her students. The time had come to face not just the council, but the very essence of their beliefs. The tension in the room thickened, clinging to Sarah like an unwelcome fog. The imposing silhouettes of the school board members loomed before her, faces unreadable as she prepared to turn their perceptions upside down. A wave of doubt washed over her, but she swiftly pushed it aside, knowing this moment was not just about her, it was about the entire student body. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she began, her voice steady but laced with underlying urgency. "I stand before you today not only as a teacher but as an advocate for our history, the stories that shape our identities." She could feel every student's hopeful gaze behind her, their personal histories now intertwined with her own resolve. Once she opened her mouth, a sense of liberation flooded through her. The narrative she had woven in her mind during the past few days unfolded effortlessly. History isn't just dates and wars, it's a tapestry made from the threads of countless lives. She glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. It's vital for the students to understand their roots, to connect their personal stories to the broader strokes of history. As she spoke, she noticed a few board members leaning in, perhaps intrigued or challenged by her assertions. Was her passion contagious? Did this bring them closer to understanding the necessity of her subject? Each powerful word built upon the last, giving her the strength to delve deeper. When students see their family histories reflected in the curriculum, they gain a stronger sense of self. They learn resilience, empathy, and the courage to face obstacles just like Marcus's grandfather. She remembered the journals she had pored over, where she had not only documented lessons but also captured moments of humanity through personal narratives. That connection was what transformed education from a sterile environment to a thriving community of learning. Yet, with each passing moment, the stakes felt increasingly high. What if the board rejected her impassioned plea? What if they questioned her integrity or dismissed her ideas as naive? A shiver of uncertainty danced along her spine. This wasn't merely a proposal, it was her conviction laid bare. As she concluded her presentation, Sarah felt a surge of courage swell within her spirit. I urge you to consider what cutting this program would mean. It wouldn't just erase a subject, it would erase the voices of our students, their cultures, their stories. She held her breath for an agonizing moment, feeling the weight of her words settle over the room. The board was silent, and Sarah's heart raced with both hope and anxiety. She had laid everything on the line. Now she was exposed, vulnerable, waiting for their verdict. Would they embrace the richness of history's diverse narratives, or would they cling to progress at the expense of personal identity? Suddenly, one of the board members broke the silence. "Mrs. Patterson, while your passion is commendable, I have to ask, why should we invest in this when there are more pressing academic priorities?" A sharp intake of breath caught in Sarah's throat. There it was, the challenge that would define this moment. She sensed a deepening urgency within herself. This was her chance to pivot from a defensive posture to proactive advocacy, to make them understand why history mattered. Because, she said, her eyes narrowing with fierceness, without understanding our past, how can we effectively navigate our future? If progress is our only goal, we risk losing what makes us human. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable, but Sarah did not back down. She had to keep pushing, to present herself as more than just a teacher but a catalyst for change. What she didn't know was how this confrontation would ultimately reshape her professional identity. As the meeting dragged on, a thunderous silence followed her argument. Sarah's palms grew clammy as she prepared for their response, emotions swirling like a tempest within her. The air was charged with anticipation. Would they recognize the merit of her words? Would her personal transformation as an educator begin here? She could feel the ground shifting underfoot as the monumental weight of the moment loomed ahead, and in an unexpected twist, the discussion evolved into something much deeper than a simple vote. It appeared Sarah might just be on the brink of a revelation that would expand her understanding of education itself. The silence hung heavy, a pregnant pause teetering on the brink of an irreversible change. Sarah's heart pounded faster, each beat echoing doubts and hopes within a singular certainty: she couldn't retreat now. The questions forming in her mind began to shape her next move. "Let me ask you this," she urged, her words slicing through the tension. "What kind of future do we wish to cultivate? One that overlooks the past, or one that acknowledges it? If we strip away these lessons, we strip away the context that guides our students' aspirations." With each word, an ember of conviction ignited within her. The board members sat motionless, their expressions hard to decipher. Sarah studied their faces more keenly now, searching for any flicker of acknowledgement or understanding. Was her message taking root in their minds? She pressed on, shaking off the haze of doubt that threatened to cloud her message. She spoke of the challenges her students faced, the complexity of their lives that her curriculum sought to address. History teaches them empathy, it teaches them about struggle and triumph. Let us be the catalysts that fuel their ambitions, not the barriers that stifle them. While her voice was steady, internally she wrestled with the vulnerability of exposing her emotional investment and the fear that accompanied it. Just as she finished, another board member leaned forward. "While your enthusiasm is commendable, there is still a significant concern about logistics. Resources are finite." The gravity of the statement weighed down on her. Was her fervor being overshadowed by practicality, the understated reality of budgets and resource allocations? "Every program requires resources, I understand that," Sarah replied, surprised at the clarity of her response, "but investing in our children's history is investing in their future. Isn't learning about who they are worth that cost? We can't quantify the value of self-identity and purpose." Pausing for a moment, she glanced at her fellow teachers seated in supportive reverence. They believed in her, which fortified her resolve. But beneath the surface, a gnawing recognition stirred. Her commitment wasn't merely to uphold a program but to redefine what education meant in her realm. What if, she began tentatively, these lessons could also engage students who feel unseen? Imagine offering a platform where they not only participate but also become storytellers of their heritage. There it was, the spark of an idea that could bridge practicality and passion. Excitement bubbled inside her, and she couldn't help but lean into it. I propose a pilot program. An initiative that allows students from all walks of life to research and present their narratives. Embracing their contributions to our history may foster a deeper connection to the educational process. A murmur cascaded through the room, confirming the stirrings of interest. Did she see a flicker of change? An ember of possibility? The board was shifting in their chairs, postures adjusting toward her proposal. The sense of urgency within Sarah escalated. By enabling students to share their unique stories, we empower them to engage with their education, actively changing the curriculum from a monolithic history lesson into a vibrant exchange of experiences. Her pulse quickened as she envisioned the dynamic discussions and collaborations that could emerge from her idea. In the back of her mind, however, a question loomed: would they buy into this vision? Her instinct told her that unveiling personal narratives could act as a powerful entry point, one that might recruit even the most skeptical board members as allies in her mission. Before any more responses emerged, the board chair shifted in his seat, and Sarah seized the opportunity to further underline the potential impact of her proposal. Imagine the increase in engagement, the potential for improved academic performance as students connect with their stories and see value in their education. Just as she began to feel the tide turning in her favor, the chair posed a new challenge. This is commendable work, Sarah, but how do you intend to measure its success? What metrics will we rely on to assess its impact? Her stomach nodded. Metrics? It was one thing to inspire, another to quantify inspiration. She had focused on the qualitative emotional journey, for it was that journey that sparked genuine learning. But now, confronted by the need to translate passion into digestible data, a new wave of uncertainty washed over her. She wrestled with these thoughts, calculating her next words carefully. The moment felt existential. It wasn't just about this initiative anymore, it was about defining her role as an educator in a world increasingly obsessed with numbers but starved for meaning. And as Sarah prepared her response, digging deeper into her core beliefs, she felt the stakes elevate once more. If there was a way to intertwine the emotional with the empirical, she had to find it. Would she find the language that bridged the gap, or would this opportunity slip into the abyss of disengagement? The room's energy crackled with uncertainty, leaving her poised on the precipice of a much larger personal discovery. The air felt electric, an undercurrent of anticipation pulsating around Sarah as she steeled herself to respond. She considered how to translate her vision into measurable outcomes without losing the heart of what she cared about. The challenge felt daunting but not insurmountable. Valid question, she began, allowing a measured breath to calm her racing heart. Success could be gauged through student engagement metrics, attendance during history classes, participation in discussions, and ultimately, their academic performance. She felt a flicker of confidence as she spoke. The analytical parts of her mind began to align with her emotional instincts. But I propose something more expansive. We could conduct surveys that assess students' emotional connections to their learning, perhaps through reflective essays or creative projects. She emphasized the word creative, imagining the artwork and stories each student would contribute. This way, we can evaluate how these personal narratives transform their sense of belonging to their education. The board members exchanged looks, the skepticism from moments earlier diminishing ever so slightly. Her thoughts swirled with hope and trepidation. Could she convince them to embrace a dual approach, one that included both quantitative and qualitative assessments? It felt revolutionary to even consider it, a merging of emotional resonance with the cold precision of data. By empowering students to tell their stories, we also teach them the importance of history in shaping their identities, Sarah continued, her excitement bubbling. Through our metrics, we can analyze trends in engagement levels, comparing them year to year and seeing how these narratives resonate with various demographics. The board, previously preoccupied, now seemed to lean in further, intrigued. A part of her buzzed with pride. She was no longer just a teacher defending a program but a thought leader proposing a new philosophy of education. Yet beneath the surface, anxiety thrummed through her like a muted drum. Would this fusion of ideas hold weight with skeptical stakeholders? Or was she merely spinning dreams from thin air? Just as another board member opened their mouth to speak, Sarah caught a glimpse of her fellow teachers. Their eyes sparkled with a mixture of admiration and caution. She realized the responsibility she carried was not just for them, but for every student who ever felt inadequate in the narrative of their own lives. Imagine, she pressed, students looking around and seeing reflections of themselves in the curriculum. That's more than education, that's liberation. The board members exchanged glances, this time with less skepticism and more consideration. But one seasoned member, with his lips pressed into a firm line, interrupted. Sarah, while passion is essential, how can we secure funding for resources if we change the entire approach? How can low engagement metrics affect our budget when it relies on traditional methods? That familiar knot in Sarah's stomach returned with ferocity. She could hear the ticking clock of opportunity fading with each passing second. How could she frame her innovative dream alongside the practical limitations? This was more than a struggle for her curriculum, this was about repositioning her entire approach to education, a delicate dance between idealism and realism. Perhaps we could pilot a funding initiative, she suggested, adrenaline surging as she contemplated a new pathway. If we can demonstrate an increase in student performance or engagement through this new framework, then we can present hard evidence to secure the funding. It was a calculated risk, but she felt invigorated by the prospect. The room was still, tension thick, but the heady aroma of hope lingered. Sarah shifted slightly, searching for any sign of agreement amidst the board members. The stakes were impossibly high. Did she have the fortitude to champion this vision in the face of financial scrutiny? With every moment spiraling into greater doubt, she reminded herself that she wasn't merely fighting for a program, she was advocating for a revolution in the way education unfolded in her school, one narrative at a time. The board was poised for her next words, but in that charged moment, Sarah sensed a deeper truth stirring beneath her aspirations. Could transforming the educational landscape redefine who she was as an educator? She took a steadying breath, knowing the path ahead would be fraught with challenges and requiring every ounce of her resolve. As she prepared to steer the conversation further, a thought flashed through her mind, a stark contradiction that hadn't crossed her before. What if this journey to redefine education opened doors to confront her own past as an educator? Would she unravel the personal narratives buried in her experiences, connecting her own story to those of her students? The realization settled heavily, setting the stage for the next pivotal chapter in her development. The boardroom's silence weighed heavily on Sarah, pressing in around her like a storm cloud circling, ready to unleash torrents of doubt. She could feel the energy shift in the room, a notch of tension as she anticipated their responses. Moments stretched out, seeming to distort time itself as she waited for any indication that her bold step forward resonated with them. A new voice broke through, a younger board member whose enthusiasm shimmered beneath the surface of practical worries. Could we explore partnerships with local organizations to support this initiative? Sarah felt a glimmer of hope ignite within her. That was the spark she needed. Collaborative endeavors could help ease the financial burden while also demonstrating community interest and support. Yes! She exclaimed, a rush of adrenaline propelling her excitement. We could engage local museums, historical societies, and even artists in our community. They could offer resources and mentorship for our students, enriching the curriculum and capturing their imaginations. The idea flowed from her lips, her passion barely held in check. As she let the vision unfold, another board member raised a skeptical eyebrow. That sounds great in theory, but how do we ensure they want to participate? Past partnerships haven't always yielded the results we hoped for. Doubt snaked through her, but she refused to succumb. Instead, she thought of the students. We would directly involve students in outreach efforts, allowing them to express what they love to learn about. Their excitement could entice partners to come on board, she asserted. The thought of students driving the initiative filled her with renewed determination. Each moment in the room began to shift, the dynamic evolved slowly from skepticism to cautious enthusiasm, yet Sarah recognized her work was far from finished. She needed to consolidate her thoughts into a swift action plan, show the board not just the capabilities of her curriculum, but also a roadmap to real-world impact that included measurable outcomes. The fear gnawed at her again, a familiar sensation that whispered questions of her competency. What did she truly know about fundraising? Yet, internal monologue was interrupted by a revelation: she could lean on her past experiences. The skills she honed while struggling to organize school events and raise funds for classroom necessities became a useful blueprint. "That's it," she muttered under her breath, catching a few curious glances. Composing herself, she continued, "I've organized events before. Perhaps we could plan a fundraiser that showcases student projects tied to historical themes. Through this showcase, we gain community interest, attract sponsorship, and inspire potential partners." The board began to murmur among themselves, and Sarah grasped for any sign that momentum was building. The interplay of excitement and uncertainty danced in her chest. Each proposal she stacked upon the other felt like climbing a rickety ladder she could easily lose her footing. The stakes were mounting, and every word needed to convince them that a humble teacher was capable of orchestrating something impactful. Additionally, she added, her voice gaining strength, "we can incorporate student feedback throughout the process. By listening to them, we'll create a curriculum that truly reflects their passions, thereby enhancing engagement." Caught up in her flow, Sarah dared to envision a tapestry where student voices intertwined seamlessly with the curriculum, their stories illuminating learning. Her heart raced with the possibilities, but that gnawing fear remained. What if her vision didn't align with financial realities? Suddenly, she locked eyes with one of her fellow teachers, whose expression held admiration and shared worry. It hit her journey wasn't solely about academic metrics or funding. It was about redefining what education meant to each student, and ultimately, to herself. As the conversation continued swirling around her, her thoughts took a turn. Could she also confront the vulnerability in her own story? What if her struggles, fears, and aspirations could serve as part of the curriculum? She realized then that sharing her journey might resonate with her students, helping to bridge the gap between her ideals and their realities. What if in unveiling her own tale, she offered them the freedom to explore theirs? Just as Sarah contemplated these weaving narratives, the next board member leaned in, ready to voice a challenge. "What happens if we can't attract enough partnerships or funding? What's your backup plan?" The moment of truth loomed, and with it, the unsettling thought lingered: who was she if this grand vision crumbled? Would she retreat into the shadows, or would the fire within her spur a rebellion against complacency, once and for all? Sarah's heart raced, the weight of the challenge pressing against her chest like a vice. Backup plans, the very notion pricked at her sense of purpose. They felt like an admission of failure before she'd even begun. But in that moment of uncertainty, a flicker of determination surged through her. "Every step we take is a learning experience," she said, steadying her voice. "If it appears that funding or partnerships are falling short, we will adapt. Our students' creativity can lead to innovative solutions. They'll be involved in troubleshooting, exploring new fundraising avenues to inspire community support." The boardroom filled with an electric charge, sparked by the conviction in her tones. She sensed the shift. She was no longer just defending an idea. She was inviting them on a journey, a collaboration built on shared responsibility. But within her, a kernel of fear still lurked. Could she navigate this uncharted territory, facing unexpected obstacles? Besides, she continued, adopting a more resolute stance, the process of showcasing student endeavors alone cultivates our own community pride. The narrative will grow, even if partnerships are fewer, we will elevate our students' voices and talents. A seasoned board member cut in with a challenge that felt personal. "And what of your own story, Sarah? You mentioned vulnerability earlier. Are you prepared to share your own struggles to engage them? This isn't just about proposals, it's about who you are." The question hit home, reverberating through her mind like a bell tolling in a quiet church. Was she ready to expose her story, lit not just with triumphs but with her own insecurities? She hesitated, contemplating how her journey through teaching developed her passion and resilience. What if she used her narrative to connect with the students authentically? I believe it's crucial for students to see that everyone faces challenges. I'm working through uncertainties myself, embracing the opportunity for growth. In revealing her setbacks and aspirations, she could provide a living example of perseverance. Yes, a voice among the board members chimed in. This is about inspiring the students not only through curriculum but through the authenticity of your experience. Validation surged through her, merging with her resolve. She envisioned developing a framework where her journey became a part of the classroom narrative, encouraging her students to explore and share their own unique experiences. However, she couldn't ignore the disquiet simmering within. Would revealing her vulnerabilities jeopardize her authority as an educator or enhance it? Absolutely, she asserted, feeling a buoyance in her thoughts. By weaving our stories into the curriculum and providing students a platform to express their ambitions and challenges, we pave the way for relatability. It removes the distance created by traditional education and engages them on a personal level. As others nodded and murmurs of assent rippled through the room, Sarah's confidence continued to build. This was not merely about outlining an initiative, it was about crafting a space for collective growth, a journey where each voice, including her own, mattered. Suddenly, the room felt both expansive and intimate. She could see the path advancing before her, a chance not just to teach but to forge connections that transcended textbooks. Nevertheless, as invigorating as this prospect was, the reflective part of her still whispered uncertainties. Just as the sense of camaraderie swelled, the board chair straightened, calling for a conclusion to the discussion. Sarah, you have given us much to think about. Let us revisit these ideas after revising the proposal with these insights. As anticipation filled the air, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The stage was set, but where would it lead? And could she parlay this brief moment of clarity into something lasting? Her gaze shifted around the room, resting on the eager expressions that met hers. An unsteady realization gripped her, the next phase of her professional life demanded an even deeper self-discovery within her. The stakes were now higher than they'd ever been, and the journey to redefine not just her curriculum, but her identity as an educator, was just beginning. As she stood there, the board members already drifting into hushed discussions about the proposal, one single thought pierced through the fog of her uncertainty: this reflection was not merely about academic progression. What if this became a pivotal moment in confronting her past failures? She couldn't shake the feeling that soon, she would have to face not just the board, but herself. Would she be ready when the moment arrived? The boardroom hummed with whispered conversations, but Sarah felt adrift, entranced by her own racing thoughts. How could she harness the moment's energy into something tangible? She needed to construct a bridge between her aspirations and her reality, and these next steps would be pivotal. The clarity she experienced earlier was quickly fading, replaced by an unease she couldn't ignore. The proposal needed solid structure: her initial vision, the compelling narrative, but it also required her revelation, her acknowledgement of fear and uncertainty. Could her personal journey genuinely resonate with her students? Navigating this new direction demanded a different kind of engagement from her as an educator. She recalled the moments from her own education, the teachers who made lasting impressions by sharing not merely knowledge but also pieces of themselves. They were authentic in their struggles, and in those moments, they seemed invincible. Yet, was she ready to expose her vulnerabilities like they had? The next day, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. She needed to articulate a plan that not only captured educational objectives but also integrated her narrative. The fear of failing to captivate her audience loomed large. With every keystroke, she fought the urge to erase her own thoughts to filter them into perfection. Instead, what if she let them flow, raw and honest? She began typing out memories, those where self-doubt had nearly stifled her progress and the moments of triumph that had come from facing her fears. This reflection became almost cathartic, allowing her to glimpse the threads of resilience woven through her story. Each setback revealed a lesson, each leap of faith illuminated another path. As she richened the narrative, she questioned, how could I invite my students to reflect on their journeys? This was a pivotal moment for her, finding the balance between guiding her students academically and nurturing their emotional growth. She turned away from the screen when a thought struck her. Perhaps she could organize a workshop, providing a safe space where narratives could unfold. Initially, she envisioned this as a simple gathering, but what if it evolved into a series of reflective sessions? The possibility sent a jolt of excitement through her. It could be a way for students to share their stories, to confront their challenges in a supportive environment, where she too could model vulnerability. The realization built upon itself wasn't at the core message she wanted to convey. By embracing their stories, they could tap into newfound confidence and understanding. In this shared journey, she could communicate that struggles need not be solitary, that vulnerability is a hallmark of strength and connection. With renewed vigor, she leaned into preparations, drafting outlines for the structure of the first workshop. Her mind raced with ideas, possibilities, and the apprehension that still lingered at the edges. Would she truly be able to guide them through moments they felt unable to express? As she moved forward, a sobering doubt crept in again. What if the students didn't relate to her experiences? What if they saw her as out of touch? The doubt felt heavy, but fueling her vulnerability also carried immense potential. She wanted to create a culture where every voice mattered, including her own. In the depths of that uncertainty, a spark ignited. This wasn't merely an initiative, it was a quest to personal and professional evolution that could redefine who she was as an educator. The clock ticked steadily, marking time while she planned for her next steps. Each tick reinforced the urgency of her resolve. She was on the cusp of something transformative, but an unwelcome ache of fear lingered in the backdrop. Would she be met with enthusiasm or apathy? Would her own journey propel others forward, or leave them indifferent? That day, feeling the weight of uncharted waters bearing down upon her, Sarah finalized her outline, but the lingering question overshadowed her enthusiasm. How would she face her students, allowing them a glimpse of her fear while she guided them through their own? As she closed her laptop, that uncertainty loomed larger than ever. The next moment would be crucial. Would that workshop be a genesis for connection or merely a reflection of her own trepidation? She took a deep breath, ready to step into the unknown. The time was coming for her to embrace not just the students' challenges, but her own. The confrontation awaited, and with it, the potential for significant realization. She would finally need to bring her story to light. Would she have the courage to let it unfold? The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah set up the classroom for her workshop. Desks were arranged in a circle to encourage dialogue, a physical representation of the vulnerability she hoped to champion. The scent of whiteboard markers mixed with the faint hum of distant chatter from other classrooms, it created a buzzing atmosphere that felt both anticipatory and intimidating. She double-checked her outline, her palms damp with perspiration. It was one thing to draft an intricate plan, but executing it required bravery she wasn't sure she possessed. The doubts crept in again, feeding her anxiety. What if she stumbled over her words? What if they stared at her like she was from another planet? This workshop was not simply about her teaching, it was about laying bare her experiences, allowing her humanity to seep through the cracks of professionalism. As students trickled in, Sarah found solace in their faces. Each one brought a unique story and set of struggles, perhaps mirroring her own. As the clock inched toward the start time, she wrestled with her openness. Would her honesty resonate or alienate? She decided to focus on the potential for shared experience rather than the fear of individual judgment. When the last student settled into place, she took a deep breath and stood before them, the outline of her vision echoing through her mind. Welcome, everyone. I want to invite you all into a space where we can explore our stories together, she began, her voice steadying as she captured their attention. Today, I'll share some of mine, but I want to emphasize that your voices matter just as much if not more. The silence that followed felt heavy, yet charged with unspoken possibilities. She recounted moments of fear and failure, her vulnerable recollections painting a picture of inadequacy that students often felt. The honesty began to weave a fragile connection, each shared struggle drawing them closer. Encouraged by their burgeoning interest, Sarah guided them through writing exercises designed to elicit memories they might otherwise bury. "What is a challenge you faced that seemed impossible?" she prompted, her heart racing. She watched as pens flew across paper, eyebrows furrowed in concentration. Here, they were contemplating their lives, acknowledging their experiences. As the session continued, a resilient energy charged the room. Students began to share snippets of their stories one by one, and with each narrative, Sarah felt her own apprehensions dissipate. The atmosphere transformed as a tapestry of shared vulnerability unfolded, students nodding in recognition at one another's words: pain, joy, resilience. In that moment, Sarah realized the power of authentic connection. Her heart swelled as one of her students, a shy girl named Emily, stood up to disclose how she had felt overwhelmed by expectations that seemed insurmountable, only to learn that she wasn't alone. "I thought it was just me," Emily said, vulnerability breaking through the barrier she'd built for so long. Responses echoed with agreement. Other students echoed Emily's sentiment, and the emotional weight in the room shifted. But a lingering question haunted Sarah's mind: was she prepared to handle the deeper currents of these confessions? The implicit trust they were forming felt momentous, yet fragile. She sensed the potential for unveiling not just their layered experiences but perhaps some unresolved ones of her own. The gravity of the hour began to anchor her, prompting her to confront what lay beneath the surface of this workshop. As she encouraged further sharing, she realized that this wasn't just a teaching moment for her students, it was a dual revelation, a pathway for her as well. But what would happen when the revelations ran too deep? The session drew to a close, and Sarah's next steps loomed large. Should she offer them more opportunities to dive deeper into their vulnerabilities, embracing what they would discover? Or would she risk coming face to face with her own undisclosed fears? Here, amidst laughter and tears, she pondered how she could further empower these students without losing herself in the process. The closing bell echoed down the hall, a reminder of boundaries, yet Sarah felt a newfound purpose swelling within her. She caught a glimpse of a potential path to authentic engagement, but a lingering question hung in the air: in the pursuit of connecting and empowering others, what parts of her would have to be unearthed in the journey ahead? Sarah stood in her classroom, the remnants of yesterday's workshop still palpable in the air. The hushed voices of students had morphed into a symphony of shared stories and collective vulnerability, each narrative a thread weaving a larger tapestry of their educational experience. What struck her most was the warmth that filled the room, a stark contrast to the anxiety she had felt when first addressing the school board. As she prepared for the day's lesson, Sarah reflected on how far she had come, not just as an educator fighting for her subject, but as an individual committed to authenticity and connection. The interactions with her students had sparked a realization: she had grown into a beacon of resilience, demonstrating that the past was not an anchor but a launching pad. Her mind replayed the workshop moments, particularly Emily's revelation about expectations. It became a catalyst for an idea: the opportunity for an A Day in Our Shoes project, where every student would create a presentation connecting their personal histories to larger historical frameworks. This wasn't just a pedagogical tactic, it embodied the essence of her passion for storytelling, illustrating how personal narratives could intersect with the broader swath of history. Realizing the magnitude of this initiative, she meticulously planned the project details. Every student would explore their family's past, but they would also examine how those histories fit into the context of significant historical events. The result? A profound understanding not only of their own identities but also of the collective story that shaped their community. In this classroom, she announced the following week, her voice echoing with newfound confidence: we will embark on a journey that marries personal history with our lessons in world events. This is your chance to bring your family's narrative to life. As she spoke, she felt a surge of empowerment. She was no longer battling for survival in her teaching career. Instead, she was embracing her role as a catalyst for transformation, both for herself and her students. In the weeks that followed, the classroom buzzed with excitement and collaboration. Students presented stories of triumph, resilience, and culture. They explored everything from immigrant experiences to familial sacrifices. Each presentation carried an essence of pride, and Sarah leaned into their courage, recognizing the weight each student carried. The level of engagement surpassed her expectations. The classroom walls became a sanctuary of creativity where everyone flourished. As the school year wrapped up, it was time to showcase their projects. The History and You Gallery Walk. Parents, community members, and school officials were invited. Sarah stood nervously, heart racing as people flowed into the classroom, witnessing the learning and personal growth unfurling before them. The room transformed into a space of pride, displaying stories that belonged to each student and their families. When the school board members arrived, eyes widened at the sight before them. Students eagerly engaged visitors, narrating how history wasn't just about dates and names, it was about struggles and triumphs reflected in their own lives. As Sarah wandered the room, she felt a profound sense of achievement wash over her. This was what she had fought for, recognition of the value that history could impart when connected to personal experiences. A councilman approached her, clearly impressed. "Sarah, this is remarkable work. You've effectively demonstrated how history can be a bridge to personal identity. I think we need to seriously revisit our priorities." Her heart swelled. It was validation of her efforts, a testament that her passion could indeed influence change. As she continued to mingle, a familiar face approached. Marcus, the young boy who had ignited her resolve at the meeting, stood with his family, pride painted across his face. "Mrs. Patterson, my presentation inspired me to write a letter to my grandfather about his journey. I want to share it with him." The heartfelt honesty echoed through her, each accomplishment illuminating a part of Sarah she had once questioned: the dedicated teacher, the staunch advocate, and the courageous storyteller. She realized that in guiding her students, she had indeed unburdened her own past fears, reclaiming her rightful place in education. In that pivotal moment, Sarah felt solid confidence radiate from within her. This was more than about saving her subject, it was about establishing a legacy of connection and identity. Maplewood stood on the precipice of rediscovery, and she was proud to shape that journey with her students. Sarah looked around the room, feeling a surge of gratitude for every challenge that had brought her here. The echoes of her grandfather's journals and the students' narratives harmonized beautifully, proving that resilience and hope flourished in every story told. This was just the beginning, and she was ready for the next chapter. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.